Many of us will be hosting friends and family throughout the holiday season, and if you aren't mindful, it could land you in a whole bunch of trouble if there is liquor involved, which is usually a given. Joining us this evening is Lindsay Charles, an esteemed personal injury lawyer with McLeish Orlando. Welcome, Lindsay. You are just the person to clarify for us all just what our responsibilities and liabilities are.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So where do we begin with this? I mean, you're throwing a party. What should you be thinking about?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most important things to remember is that getting together isn't just about drinking too. So I think as a guest attending these parties, we also have to remember that, your personal responsibility doesn't just check out at the door when you arrive at your host's house. Everything that you do will still kind of attach to you as well. But if you are hosting a party and there's liquor being served or people are bringing their own drinks, you want to be making sure that you're not maybe exasperating the drinking knowing that someone's going to be driving.
How do you do that, though? I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with friends saying, I think you should give me the keys. And if people have had a little bit, I've seen people say, no, I'm fine. And they've had 10 drinks and they can't stand up.
Well, in that case, I would recommend not letting them drive home. Maybe you have another friend going the same way and they can drop them off and you can drop their car off in the morning, perhaps having a taxi number on hand. But yeah, if you know someone's intoxicated and you do know they're driving home and you do see them that they're visibly kind of inebriated, you're going to want to try and make sure they're not getting into the car.
Now, what happens if somebody you didn't know that realized that they were over the legal limit? What happens to you as a host, or what could happen if they do get in behind the wheel and they do injure somebody else, get into some kind of collision?
Yeah, so if you're not aware that the person's intoxicated, they're not showing the signs of visible inebriation, and you haven't been exasperating the risk of them getting further intoxicated, the court's quite clear that liability is not going to fall on you as a social host. Now, it's important to remember that there is a distinction between a commercial host and a social host. So a bar, for instance, or a restaurant, if you're going out there, and they have a whole different set of standards than someone who is hosting a party at your own house.
So what do the courts want you as a host to do and not do? What are your legal responsibilities?
So the way the law is kind of framed is it says, don't perpetuate the risk if you know someone is driving. So, for instance, you don't want to say, hey, I know you're driving and here, have another one, take one for the road kind of thing. They recognize the fact that there's kind of these policy considerations to people having parties. These things happen. And as long as you're not kind of perpetuating the risk of someone continue to drinking while they're visibly inebriated, the courts have kind of said you're okay. A lot of this has been left in somewhat of a gray area. It hasn't yet been fully decided yet. So my best kind of common sense line of thinking is, use your common sense. If you know someone's driving, don't continue to, engage in further serving them.
Okay, I was just going to ask about the in-between, the personal party that you're having at home. Then there's the bar. What about the office party where 200 people are coming, which is also in between? It's not a commercial establishment, but they've obtained a liquor license to host it.
Yeah, so I haven't looked specifically at that area. It's a very narrow issue. It is different than having like a social host party where you're just having 10 of your friends over for dinner and it's a nice dinner party. And it's, it would be more towards the line of that commercial host. I know, for instance, at our office, we make sure that all of our employees have the taxi chit to get home. And
as they did here, yeah, absolutely.
So, you do want to err on the side of caution. I think anyone you care about, you want to make sure they get home safe, and your employees, you want to make sure that they get home safe too. So as much as the fact that there is the law, it's also about just making sure your friends and family and other people in society are safe.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we're seeing more and more marijuana use now that it's sort of borderline again. So what happens if you think somebody's too stoned to drive? Is it the same law?
That's an interesting question. I haven't seen a case on that yet, but I would assume it would be the same. But yeah, I mean, I personally haven't seen that specific case come out yet. But at the same time, I know the police are looking at driving high, kind of the same way as driving drunk. And so I could see in the future case law kind of following the same way.
Yeah, I know that. I think they now have the equivalent of a breathalyzer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't they?
Yeah.
To see if you're stoned or not.
That's what I've heard.
What about underage? Because sometimes there's a party. It's sort of a family thing. People bring their older children. You're not quite sure if they're of age or not, and you're not watching what they're drinking. And let's say they get in a car and something happens, and you as adults are supposed to be responsible for them.
Well, there's still the no alcohol under. Is it 24? Is it?
Yeah, I think you can't drive drive with alcohol in your system unless you have a full G license. So, I mean, it's been years since that's for me, but I think G1's at 16, then you wait the 2 years and it's G2 and then 2 years after that. But then I also think there's an age requirement involved too.
Yeah, there is. I think it's 24 or maybe 25. But I know my children are 20 and 22, and if they're going to party, it's Uber all the way.
It's a very good idea.
I know. But what if they don't? I mean, what if they do something they're not supposed to do, which has been known to happen?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like the same course of action, it's, you should be making sure that if you know someone is driving and you see that they're visibly intoxicated, you should be doing everything you can to make sure that they don't get home or they don't drive home. And that's not even just necessarily the law. It's also just making sure that people on the road are safe.
I think one of the reasons that doesn't happen more is people really don't want to put their friends on the spot and say, how many drinks have you had? I'm taking your keys. It's a very awkward situation.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that, and I think that's where it comes back to. As a guest, you can't just check out your responsibilities as soon as you walk in your friend's door. And, if you're having a holiday party, you're there to have fun. You don't want your social host or whoever's hosting your dinner party to be worrying all night. So I think a lot of the time it's almost like, what are your responsibilities as a guest as well? It's a great time of the year to have a good time with friends and family. You don't want people sitting on the edge of their chair wondering what's going to happen after this party. So I think it also falls on you as a guest, making sure you're doing well as too.
So, Lindsay, if you ended up in court, would that excuse fly with a judge?
Sorry, which excuse?
The excuse being, they're my friends and I was watching, but I didn't see the other 3 drinks that they had, and I didn't really want to cross-examine them as they left.
So a lot of the case law turns on the visible signs, and if you further exacerbated the risk of them continuing to drink knowing that they're driving.
Meaning if I keep offering them a drink when I know they've had 6.
Or you see that they are visibly intoxicated.
We've seen, you talked about that it's quite different with bars and organized and hotels and that kind of thing. The law is different. And we saw a case go through the courts out of the cottage country area, Muskoka, where a bar was indeed charged. Is that happening more and more?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we do see a lot of people get involved in accidents involving drunk driving after leaving a commercial establishment. It does happen. The difference in the way the courts view things is that those people are trained to be able to see if someone's intoxicated. They also have a vested interest in over-serving because they're making profit. So it's kind of also that policy kind of aspect of it where it distinguishes a social host from a commercial host.
Even though they have no idea that person may have had 6 drinks before they sat down in their bar.
Well, I mean, the first bar would probably still be involved. It's a lot of hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
But, in theory, right, someone's paying you money for a drink so you can see how many drinks that they've had at your establishment. And that's why there's things like bouncers and whatnot when you're leaving. And that's why those situations can arise. And it is unfortunate, of course.
Well, a quick funny story. One New Year's Eve, I was anchoring the Late Show, went to pick up my husband afterwards, and he said, I'll drive home. from a party. I said, if you can find the car, I'll let you drive. He couldn't find where he parked it. That was the way I solved that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many ways now. I think there's even a program where they can drive your car home for you. So
Yeah, absolutely.
stuff like that.
Good
There's
idea.
Uber, there's taxis, and I think drinking driving's on the rise. So why not have fun in other ways too? Be offered to be the DD. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is What She Said on The Jewel. Stay with us.
She might just change.